And this is drawing on work conducted at the water program at the Smith School of Enterprise and Environment at Oxford University, and it's drawing on findings from the whole group that includes Rob Hope, Patrick Thompson, Tim Foster, Jacob Katuva, and Cliff Niaga. And this presentation really links well with Katrina's comments on sort of perceptions of the wash sector. There's a lack of data and a poor record of sort of sustainability. And what this presentation is trying to do is to put some numbers to some of those challenges. We are also drawing on the OECD framework of the 3 T's, as Katrina has introduced them, so tariffs, taxes, and transfers, and how that works out in practice. In terms of tariffs, how are the rural poor taking on as part of user payment? How much are they taking on? Maybe up to a third or half, but never all of the maintenance cost. And this needs to be topped by investors and governments. In terms of the transfer side, what type of investors are coming in? As Katarina has pointed out, the donor community can be sometimes fickle in terms of finance. Sometimes there's much available, sometimes there's not. And then the tax side, will governments eventually bridge the financing gap for rural water? And of course, they play an absolutely critical role here, but they might be sometimes a bit more cautious in their role as well. So it's about this catalytic phase of what types of investors would come in to support at the initial stages and the conditions to move that financing forward. So this model reflects the idea of blended finance through a trust fund that we're applying to our work in Kenya, and I will go into more detail in a little while. So this presentation is about 3 components, about payment behaviors, sort of digital data and linked to the monitoring side, and then performance models to unlock some of that finance. And moving on. Let's do a sort of rapid run through some of the data on Africa. Community-based management is still the main sort of paradigm. All the highlighted countries in blue subscribe to that and have cost recovery for O&M as part of their community-based management policy. So after capital infrastructure is constructed, so kiosks, tube wells, etc., the rural users have to pay for it with variable results. So how many households are actually paying for rural water services? You can see that on that diagram on the right, and quite wide variation across the countries. And some of the data that I will be presenting today draws on Kenya, which is just one notch above the weighted average, so around 30%. Now in the figure on the left, you can see revenue collection rates across 5 countries. They are highest for rural utilities with piped schemes, but hand pumps and standpipes and kiosks are much lower, and there are variations in the countries where we have data. In the figure on the right, you can see rural water point non-functionality rates, and if there is revenue collection, then the non-functionality rate is much lower. This is maybe unsurprising, but it is good to put some numbers to it. What we don't understand is why some people are paying and others are not, which I will get into over the next few slides. So this is data from rural Kenya, the coastal county with around 800,000 inhabitants. It's ranked 41st out of 47 in terms of sort of poverty rates. And some of the work that I'll be drawing on is work by Tim Foster. It's an analysis of 229 years of data of around 53,000 payment records. The payment rate, it demonstrates that around 70% of the users are roughly paying. Communities collecting pay as you fetch on a volumetric basis generate higher levels of revenue than those that are charging a flat fee. And his analysis has also shown that once 60% of the users are paying, then systems tend to be more sustainable. So one of his striking findings was if there's a payment rate between 61 and 64%, it is 7 times more likely to remain stable than if there's only a contribution of around 51 to 54% in a certain community. And then if we then model these behaviors to understand what are the predictors of payment, 4 factors demonstrate an effect. So one is distance to the water point, so convenience matters. The second is water quality, so it's about pH and taste. We are fortunate that we work in Koehler, where CEDA and the World Bank installed a lot of rural water points in the 1980s. And some of those records are still available from the tube wells for aquifer depth and quality of water. So one effect that we could really see is that legacy matters. If you install infrastructure in a place where water quality is poor, people are less likely to pay. And this may be, again, unsurprising, but this is really long-term evidence on this. The third is productive use. So the water pays for water hypothesis, where users use water for small-scale agriculture and livestock watering. Again, the payment rates are higher. And then finally, seasonality. So it's a dry season versus the wet season. People are more likely to pay in the dry season and then switch to other sources, often unimproved in the wet season. So overall, late payment and non-payment are prevalent. Socio-ecological system is really around the sort of water quality of the groundwater. And then higher revenue collection and higher unimproved use. What we found is a big conundrum with the SDG. Financial sustainability does not seem to be compatible with all service delivery. There's often an imbalance between the financial sustainability and cost of delivery side versus the affordability and no one left behind aspects. Then moving on to the second part of this presentation in terms of digital data and monitoring. What you can see here is a data logger that's installed into the handles of hand pumps. And it's about how to get the data to understand what's really going on with the systems, with the infrastructure. These loggers are currently installed in Kenya and Bangladesh. And the data loggers send a signal to understand how the hand pump is used, and it sends the information automatically. And this information can then also be used to design and work with the institutions. So what some of this data tells you is, for example, daily patterns of usage during wet and dry seasons. So you can, for example, look at day and nighttime usage. So, for example, during the current drought in East Africa, some of the pumps have demonstrated that there was high usage even in the night hours. And when we looked into it, it was basically during the day water was pumped for drinking water and domestic purposes, and in the early and late night hours, water was pumped for livestock. But so what this shows you, really, there is no standard sort of hand pump pattern. Usage patterns here is around 250 hand pumps in Koehler, and at the top you see rainfall on this graph, and there's really a very close match. When it rains more, people use the hand pump less. They use other sources, rainwater harvesting, and also often unimproved sources. And in dry periods, the demand on the infrastructure is that much higher. So this also plays through for kiosks and piped systems. So we have some data on that as well. All in all, information on its own is maybe, to an extent useless. So we set also up local maintenance companies, that fix the rural water infrastructure, which we rolled out as a free service for 1 year, and then started a payment scheme where users have to regularly prepay into the system based on insurance logic. We set a 3-day benchmark for the repairs, which the company that we have been incubating generally met at 99% of the time. And the communities used to only meet that around half of the time. And on average, it actually takes about a month to fix the infrastructure, so this is not a linear line either. And this really demonstrates, to an extent, an order of magnitude improvement in terms of the time it takes to fix it, the downtime. The data are interesting as you have maintenance cost and water use. So you can also calculate the unit cost of production. So you can start, like in urban systems, to examine the infrastructure, low value, high cost pumps, should they be replaced? And are there high volume pumps that should be upgraded to submersible pumps with pipe networks as they are paying and using the water? So these kinds of questions can become feasible if this information is available. And then finally, some choice modeling, which has been which examines the demand for water by quality, taste, maintenance, supply, and the number of days it takes to fix the infrastructure. And the data demonstrates that downtime and water quality are the determining factors. The figure shows that the infrastructure has to be fixed basically within 2 days to really have a positive effect, and no real positive utility if it takes much longer than that. And this work then is translated also in some of the institutional aspects. Here the FundiFix model. Fundi is Swahili for mechanical local artisan. It is a professional maintenance service provider at the supra-communal level, addressing rural water user risks at multiple levels. So one aspect is about having better information, so the smart monitoring aspect that I've already talked to. Then the sustainable finance aspect, regular prepayments via mobile payments. So in Kenya, M-Pesa is obviously very common and feasible for this. Professional services, so it's local artisans that deliver the services, they have performance-based contracts. So in a way, long-term, this could also be started to be benchmarked. And all the final really key part is the coordination side at the institutional level. There's an absolute need for government support for coordination, to also stop some sort of organizations parachuting in and really coordinating the rural water sector. The business rationale is scale reduces risk, so networking rural water points in one system leads to improved service delivery and lower cost. Here you can see the teams in Kitui and Kwale counties in Kenya, and they were fixing hand pumps and submersible pumps here. And then I wanted to present a bit more on the performance data from Miambani in Kitui County. You see the number of repairs and downtime days per repair since its inception in December 2012. Generally, it was fixed within 1 day, the infrastructure, since December 2013. You have a spike of 7 days in June 2013, which I think was related to some health issues then. But since then, it's basically sort of stabilized around 1, maximum 2 days of downtime. The number of repairs can go up to 38 in this, as you can see in this figure. Then a collection efficiency, again, a very critical part. It dropped in 2016, which we think is related to a drought event during that period. It has picked up again since. This kind of data is really equivalent to WASREP data, so the national regulator for water data, who strongly supports this type of data collection. And in a way, this kind of performance is quite similar to urban utilities. Unfortunately, we're not saying this is great performance, but unfortunately reflects the reality. Here you can see the average cost of repair, maybe around sort of $50 or a bit less on average. And then again, the curve of the number of repairs going through. This chart really shows where reality hits. It demonstrates what we call a working ratio. So it's the local revenue generated divided by the local costs. And here it's from the 2 local companies in Kitui and Kwale in Kenya. And you can see it is very variable, going up to 25% in 1 month, but it really is sort of hovering around. We have also had a management issue with one of the companies, which we have dealt with now. But once again, it reflects the reality. So it really is a massive financing gap here. We think that working at scale, also going into pipe schemes, can narrow this gap. What we're doing that now with these companies, and we expect that the numbers will get a bit better, but the reality really is that getting to a working ratio beyond 30 to 50% is ambitious, and a gap is likely to remain. So to respond to this challenge to an extent, we set up a trust fund specifically designed for the maintenance of existing infrastructure, not new infrastructure. And we think maintaining old infrastructure is more costly and more difficult because it can design new systems much better and more efficiently. But the reality is that a lot of this infrastructure is out there and needs some sort of maintenance and then the finance aspects of that. So we have gone to investors and have small investments from a mining and agricultural company in Kenya that have put money into this based on performance metrics that we share. So in a way, you can call them the loss leaders. They're provided to take the hit, provided we give them data on the performance as well as on the beneficiaries. And they see it as a mechanism for spreading social benefits in the area and thus put in sort of around tens of thousands of dollars. And we're looking of how to expand that in the future. I think one interesting aspect here is maybe that sort of possible mismatch between, sometimes there's sort of angel investors between millions of dollar investment question versus the need for these sort of smaller scale projects is around this sort of tens of thousands, which again relates to Katrina's figure on the project size in relation to low to high risk service providers and their ranking in the risk platform. So government is critical in all of this as a sort of long-term sustainable actor to bridge this gap. And I'd like to end here on thanking all partners, funders, and the governments in the countries we work, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.